Hello, everybody. Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm José.
I'm Mike.
And we've just come back from seeing The Nun.
The Nun.
The Nun.
Which is, which you couldn't quite believe was being offered in 4DX.
No.
You said, a nun movie? 4DX. Not quite realising. I think maybe you thought that it was going to be like late 60s sort of Eastern European art movie. But actually it's 2018 American horror movie.
Yes. Okay, I had in mind that Ida, really, from a few years ago.
Oh,
yeah. It's something about a novice who finds out she's Jewish. I somehow had that kind of film in mind. And of course, I've been thinking about nun movies because, I've been watching a lot of Spanish films. And actually, there was a genre of the nun movie.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I wasn't thinking clearly, obviously, and I was thinking, 4D for a nun movie? I don't get it. What are you going to do? Be shaken through the psalms or, the heavenly choir moment?
Well, as it turned out, it's a horror movie.
Yes.
Set in the 1950s, and it's about evil and some nuns.
I must say, and this is weird because I didn't know it was part of the Conjured series, right?
The Conjuring.
The Conjuring. And I have seen the first Conjuring film, which, I had forgotten that I'd seen it. And really, throughout the film, I kept thinking, I don't get this movie at all. I just don't get it. Like, I didn't understand the geography of it. I didn't understand where the horror was coming from. I didn't understand the premises of the fictional world that were being created. I didn't understand why some spirits were coming, when, why. Like, it just didn't make sense to me, really. So, all the moments where you're supposed to be scared, I didn't even find it funny or anything. I was just like, immobile.
I think it's probably the case that if you're familiar with the Conjuring series, that wouldn't make any more sense. I mean, this film... See, I haven't seen any of the Conjuring. So I was surprised to find out after the film finished that there is such a thing as the Conjuring universe.
Yes.
Rather like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC universe, they're making a big universe of movies, but they're horror movies. It's quite novel to me.
Yes.
But I haven't seen any of them.
I saw the first one. But actually, I wouldn't have connected it with this one.
No, well, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga show up at the start, and I know that they are in The Conjuring. They're these, they play these sort of paranormal hunter figures, I think.
Yes.
And then I think the films are I think they're based on real life people, and then the idea is that the films are based on their sort of cases.
Yes.
So there's The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2, and there's also Annabelle and Annabelle 2.
Oh, right, okay.
Which I haven't seen either. They're about like creepy dolls, I think.
Yes.
I think they're the ones directed... Are they the ones directed by James? Let me just check. No, James Wan directed The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2, and the Annabelle films are directed by John Leonetti and David Sandberg. But they struck me as James Wan type films because they're about creepy dolls, and he's the guy who made the Saw films, which the central sort of... There's a puppet figure, Billy, which is creepy and, in those. Anyway, so those are clearly connected, and then this is another connected one, and Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga's characters introduce it, or rather they are used to introduce it. You see a thing about a painting of a creepy looking nun that Patrick Wilson's done, and Vera Farmiga says something like, "That's the nun from my visions," or something, and it just goes, okay, we're in the 50s now, and you don't see them again until if they bookend the film really weirdly. The film ends weirdly.
I don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't understand it.
Well, we don't want to spoil it, I guess, but they bookend the film. Like, the film is clearly the main action of the film is something that happened in the 1950s that is related to their work in the 70s. So let's say what the action in the 50s is, which is there is a nun has committed suicide by hanging herself. I was quite impressed that the film uses the word hanged rather than hung.
Yes.
That struck me. I was like, they've paid a bit of attention. Someone knows something. Like, normally people say hung. But a nun has hanged herself. You see at the start that she and an older nun in this monastery in Romania have been in the kind of bowels of well, not monastery. It's not even a convent. It's... What is
It's an old castle that's become a convent, yes.
Right, yeah. Carter Monastery. Oh, apparently it's a real place. It's a former Cistercian monastery in southern Transylvania, currently an evangelical Lutheran church. Anyway, that's where they are. So they are living in this. It's a convent for the purposes of the film. And they're in the bowels of this place, and there's this door at the end of a long, creepy corridor that has the words on it or in Latin, but God ends here, which is really cool. The door opens and like some creepy stuff happens, and one thing leads to another, and the nuns are dead, and one of them appears to have committed suicide by hanging. The body is discovered by this French-Canadian bloke who lives there, and the Vatican sends a priest and a young nun who's not yet taken her vows to investigate. And the reason that this nun has been selected becomes apparent during the film. So that's all we can say, sort of without spoilers. And there are a lot of jump scares happen. The film operates really heavily on jump scares, but there is a kind of mystery, which I found fairly effective. Like I did want to know. I didn't think at any point it would be kind of explained satisfactorily where all this evil comes from. There's always some bullshit explanation, but the mystery as to what was going to happen and how things would be resolved, I was interested in.
Well,
spoilers appear on.
Yeah, maybe. I just didn't. You see, I think in order to be scared, you kind of have to know what to be scared about or what the logic of the world is, and I just kind of never felt kind of situated in it, really. So I feel that you must know where the danger is coming from, what options the characters have to avoid it, and then kind of, give the threat that that looks like they might not avoid it, right? And then you get scared. But it's just felt like things were coming out of, like, the blue, really.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I just kind of didn't understand the logic of the supernatural thing. At some point it gets explained, right, that, what happened was, that some crusaders came in, they locked, all the evil in this place under...
Well, the place was built by a guy who was into witchcraft and stuff, and he kind of released evil.
Into
and then
the world,
and then it was locked under the floor, and they sealed it with this artifact, this relic,
yes,
that contained the blood of Christ.
Yeah, so they sealed this dimension, really, by using a vial from the blood of Christ. And then what happened is during World War II, some bombs fell and reopened the seal, so it had let all this evil into the world. Which I thought, fair enough, but to me the film is such poor storytelling. So, and actually I was kind of, I was very admiring of the cinematography and the production design. I thought it was beautifully lit, and kind of full of arresting images, really.
That occurred to me.
So so it looks very skilled, right? And it's a pleasure to look at, and the images have real depth. But actually then I just couldn't make sense of the story. I couldn't make sense of the characters, of what they were doing.
Really?
Yeah, I just could not.
It seemed very simple to me.
Well, maybe it was too simple.
Well, it seemed very simple. I mean, as you say, that there is the backstory that's given as to why evil is kind of in this place.
Yes.
Which once that's just a scene of exposition. This old, I think he was a duke, was interested in the occult, and then they managed to seal it away when it was taken over, and then and then they keep on praying. That's quite an interesting thing. They maintain this vigil of praying 24/7 to God. This permanent adoration keeps the evil at bay.
Well, that's what we're told, but in fact we find out that that's not really the case because they're all dead.
Well, that's how.
So even that's a cheat.
Well, it's kind of a cheat, but that's also when you talk about the stakes that the not being clear, or whatever. That's very clear, and actually that's a kind of pit in your stomach moment where you go, oh, the demon, whatever, Valak was it called Valak, the demon thing that has been brought out. Has been fooling them this whole time, because.
But fooling whom? Because
they haven't.
Left.
No. Well, that's it. That's it. They have been doing it. It's the nun that committed suicide was the last one. That's what they realized.
That's when the story begins. I know.
Yeah, that's what they realized. That's the last one, and that suicide leads these two to their investigation, and then when you see the nuns praying, that's all fake.
Well, let's be clear.
That's when the demon is doing that. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stuff where you go.
So we are in agreement. When the film starts, all the nuns are already dead.
Yeah, and the demon needs a host.
And yet we keep seeing nuns flying and praying, and actually the moments where it's meant to be in the diegetic world or in some other, they're not distinguished. So actually the kind of the film doesn't have a logic, or it's cheating you all the time.
It is cheating you all the time, but I think actually the film, as the film progresses, it gets better. But there's a lot of stuff with jump scares and a lot of stuff with just things happening in the background and hands coming out from things and accompanied by boom music to scare you. There's an awful lot of that, and there is this. You did get this thing of like, so the demon is just fucking with them. Like, it's silly. It's very, very silly, and I totally accept that. As the film goes on and there's more explanation given, I think the film improves. Actually, I think the film is kind of the opposite of Hereditary, in that what we both agreed on pretty much with Hereditary was as it descended into madness, it got worse. We preferred all the stuff at the start when it was about a more kind of earthly, real-life drama, right? And this film, I feel, is exactly the opposite. At the start, when it's doing all jump scares and it's just, they don't really know what's happening, and there's nuns flying around and there's stuff coming out of the ground and the guy gets buried alive and blah, blah, blah. It's nonsensical and it's very silly, and the scares aren't effective. But
I was bored.
And I was pretty bored. But as the film undergoes a similar, I think, descent into madness as Hereditary, or as something like Knowing, where this isn't to spoil Knowing, but basically Knowing kind of promises things that a film will often promise and then shy away from. But what Knowing does is it carries through everything it says it's going to do. So it's not a perfect film, but it has the courage of its convictions. And that's kind of what this film does as well. It goes mental. And that's when I feel like, that's when I said to you in cinema, like, it's doing some really nutty stuff, but I admire its balls.
Well,
and I think I like that about it.
I didn't like any of it, except that it looked very. It looked like the work of real craftsmen. You know, it was wonderful to look at, and actually it then made the storytelling and the story indeed that it had to tell, you know, and the way that it told its story all the more disappointing for me,
I guess. I mean, I would not go too far on how beautiful it is. I think there are the production design was something I was going to bring up. Because it is fantastic, and I assume they're shooting a lot of it on location, but I assume a lot of it is sets as well. And whatever the case, there is real work been put. Like, it feels like a real sort of, you know, kind of. It's a place with history, and I think the set design is fantastic.
You feel like, you know, there was real artistry behind the cinematography and the production design, and it was an artistry that the director could not put to effective use.
I think there is some artistry behind the cinematography, and I think that the lighting is good. I feel like there's a kind of repeated shot you get where the film is building up to a jump scare, where you'll have a character on one side of the screen looking into the other half of the frame, basically, and the other half of the frame is pitch black. You know, whether he's looking into, you know, something behind a door or behind a curtain or whatever it might be, it's pitch black, and from there you know that something is going to emerge, or maybe it won't, and that's you know, that's how a lot of the scares work. But I like that. Like, it's also, we saw it on the Limax screen, so it was very big.
Big, yeah.
So
almost too big, actually.
We sat very close to it.
Yeah.
But that, you know, that really made that kind of, it emphasised just how well you couldn't see anything, and the fear of the unknown. But the film does an awful lot with the camera rotating and spinning, and a lot of Dutch angles to emphasise kind of madness and things spinning out of control, which again I really liked and I think are really effective. And also it has this thing that I think Mother had, where there's a very, very strong focus on close-ups. The camera hangs around really close to characters, whether they're looking at their faces or they're following them from behind, and everything else is out of focus, which has a kind of feeling that I think communicates a feeling of it heightens the tension, because you know you're being limited as to what you can see. On the other hand, it's not that much fun to look at, and I think that the shots that are beautifully composed, and there are some, are not that common, and the shots in between are, as simple as it sounds to say, like a mediocre shot. They're just they're nothing really special, and actually they hinder your enjoyment sometimes. There's an awful lot of shaky cam. For instance, when the priest is fighting the the demon in the form of the kid that he failed to exorcise properly years ago. It's kind of a demon of his past. That scene, basically that kind of sequence, fails to be scary in any way because it's actually so heavy on the shaky cam. You can't make good sense of anything that you're seeing, really.
But also, you can't make sense of the whole thing. I just couldn't make sense. I mean, you got the sense that it was like, something from the past. But why it took on this form and why the snake imagery and what powers it had to hurt and where they came from and what they could do. I mean, none of that was clear. So I mean, it's one of those things where you think you're meant to be horrified and scary, but actually I just wasn't. I was kind of like,
I know what you mean. I guess I feel like because I've seen that sort of thing before, and I expect it to be nonsensical because it always is. I didn't have a problem with that. Yeah, these films do operate in that way of where it's just literally anything could happen next.
Well, yeah, I need more patternings.
Sure.
I need more structure. And there were some things, because you don't expect a film like this to be realistic or anything.
No.
But there were some things that bothered me. So, for example, the film is set in 1952 Romania, right? Without any mention. So there's a mention of the war, but there's no mention that it's now a communist regime, and what is the church doing in a communist regime, and there are things actually that you don't need to make the film about that to bring them into play and to add texture, right? Like, it just felt stupid. It felt like they didn't know and they didn't bother to find out and they didn't bother to add little touches, right, to the story.
Is that when Ceausescu was in power?
I think Ceausescu was probably later, but I do think that Romania became a communist country in the post-war.
Ceausescu was the General Secretary of the Communist Party from 65 to 89.
Right. So that's later. The film is set in 52.
Yeah, but I'm if you give me a second, I'll have a look at the sort of history of Romanian...
Yeah, see when it became communist. I think it was like, 45, 46 or something. 47.
I'll have a look.
After the war.
Socialist Republic of Romania refers to Romania under Marxist-Leninist one-party communist rule that existed officially from 1947 to 1989.
Well, there you go.
So it had been communist for 5 years at this point.
So, and one of the first things that the communists did was get rid of churches and monasteries.
Yeah.
So...
But this one was so evil that they couldn't. I mean, the film is...
Well, they could have said so, right? Like, it would have made it interesting to at least say that.
Yeah, that's true. It would have been... I mean, it would have had that level of camp that I think the film does indulge in, quite knowingly as well. Like, there is an awful lot of... And this is why the character Frenchie, I think, is kind of... This is the role that he plays, because you've got the priest and you've got the nun. And then you've got this guy, Frenchie, who's this French-Canadian living in Romania at the time, who they kind of meet up with, and he's the one who takes them up to the castle and gives them a bit of a potted history of why it's creepy. And then he comes back to help them at the end. And well, when he's not there, the language is... it has that kind of Catholic feel of like, oh, the evil, oh, we must pray, oh, this, that, and the other. And then he comes back in and he's wielding a shotgun as if that's going to do anything.
Exactly.
And then
spirits.
and he's sort of going like, he has the effect of undercutting some of the seriousness of what's happening. Like, so there's this great scene, I think it's great, where before they go, we're going to go under to the bowels of the castle and find this relic and try and consecrate the place and cast the demon out. She says, I want to take my vows first, and that's a huge deal. And the film turns into this huge deal of like, are you sure you're ready? He goes, yes, I want to devote my life to God in this. And so she's taking her vows, and then in the background, you've got Frenchie cocking a gun. It's like this really weird, sort of ballsy Catholic action scene intro. But I think that's quite deliberate to have the effect of like undercutting the highfalutin seriousness of the Catholic kind of Latin language and that sort of thing.
Sure, and you laughed, and I could understand why you laughed. And maybe I'm just looking at it in a much more pedestrian way. But my thinking of it, what is a French Canadian doing in Romania? During Marxist-Leninism, like, is he a secret communist? Is he like, I mean, it's just. Yeah, it's just stupid.
No, absolutely. Although I don't know actually, because there's no way that this can be based too much on real life, and from what I can tell, it's not. But the bookend that the film has is
and these are spoilers now.
Oh, we're well into spoiler territory. We've been in spoiler territory for years. You return. It says 20 years later, and you're at a lecture being given by Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson's characters.
Yes.
About exorcisms, and they say this guy Frenchie was possessed by a devil, and then you see that in that final fight between them, the devil or the demon or whatever got into Frenchie, and here's his exorcism. And from what I understand, these films, in some way or other, and I don't know to what extent, are supposed to be based on these real life cases from these two paranormal whatever hunters. So I don't know if he was one of them, and they're kind of inventing this whole backstory to it or whatever.
Even that didn't make sense to me, because so the film gets its symbolisms mixed up. So on the one hand, you have the priest saving himself from this band of evil nun spirits by making a cross with fire, right, that they can't bridge. And on the other hand, you have this guy who's possessed by the devil, and the sign of him being possessed by the devil is a cross on the back of his neck.
Upside down cross.
Oh, upside down.
Yeah.
Cross. Ah.
Yeah. That's like in that first scene, the cross on the wall is turning upside down. I mean, to be fair, that burning cross on the floor, I thought, when have you ever seen a burning cross like meant something good? That was quite bold.
True.
Let's talk about the actors a bit, because I was thinking the whole way through. I was thinking, this girl really looks like Vera Farmiga.
It's her daughter.
It's her sister.
Oh, it's her sister.
It's her sister who's 21 years younger.
Oh, right,
so
okay.
Young enough to be a daughter, but nonetheless, I'm going because I was thinking, wait, so is this Vera Farmiga when she was a kid, and this is her backstory? I didn't know. Actually, that's not the case, but she really, really looks like her.
There is a resemblance
because it's her sister.
Yes, she's very good.
She's very good. And the bloke who plays the priest, Demian Bichir, who is Mexican American, and apparently one of the members of the Bichir family, who I'm not aware of. He starred in telenovelas.
Right, I don't know him.
Yeah, he was fine.
The one I liked was actually the guy who played the French Canadian.
Jonas Bloquet, who's Belgian, in fact.
Belgian, yes. I mean...
He was kind of charming and cheeky and...
He was charming and kind of sexy and funny, not much is asked of him, but he made a good impression. No, I think the girl, Formiga, is very, very good. And actually, I think a lot is asked of her.
Yeah, let's just find her actual name, because we've only called her Vera Farmiga's sister so far. Her name is Taissa Farmiga, or Taissa Farmiga.
Okay, Taissa Farmiga. So she's very, very good, and I think a lot is asked of her.
Yeah.
She's meant to be placid and religious, and my God, she's meant to be terrorized and blah blah. And I think she does it all very well, and she does have a kind of a really nice stillness that kind of conveys intelligence and religious conviction, which is
Yeah, I agree.
It's not an easy combination to convey. So I thought she was excellent. But my God, the film I thought was terrible.
I don't think it's terrible. I think it's nutty enough to get away with how bad it is at the start.
I couldn't wait for it to end.
I wasn't that mad about the design of the nun, the central nun, who is this kind of which seems to be the demon's main form.
Nun, yeah.
Is the demon's main form is as this creepy nun, and it just looks a bit like Marilyn Manson.
Well, actually, I thought when she was wearing a veil, the whole thing with the abbess and the veil and so on, I thought that was very effective, actually.
Yeah.
But as soon as the veil comes off and you see this cartoony, like you said, Manson figure, then it was very bad design.
Marilyn Manson, we should say, not Charles.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Although there's a bit where she ends up with Taissa Farmiga's character gets a pentagram carved on her back.
Yes.
Which and
then disappears.
Well, she puts her thing back on, so I guess it disappears, but you never see it again. But I just imagine I was laughing at that bit just because it was quite an effective scene. She's praying and praying, trying to keep this vigil going while she's having a pentagram carved into her back from an invisible entity. But then and then it's revealed that she's actually the only one there, and then she stopped her praying, which is when you realise, oh God, so the thing has really got out or whatever. But then I guess it's got out before. But then she's the only one there, and so the the Frenchy guy and the priest aren't there, and just like I sort of imagine them sort of walking in and going, "Oh right, so she's just got a pentagram on her back now. Like this is one of the things that's happening in this church." It was really, and the kind of the nuttiness actually, absolutely came to a head when the nun is drowning her, because there's just a lake now that's in the bottom of the church, and the nun's drowning her, and she.
The evil demon nun.
Yeah, the evil demon nun. And she has the artifact. And she has the artifact underwater with her. The good nun, this is. And when the demon nun picks it out, it's been smashed. And the thing isn't in there. The vial of Judas's blood isn't in there anymore. It's containing sort of orb. And she's like, "Oh, where is it?" And then Titus Farmiga spits Jesus' blood all over the demon, and that's what makes her go, "Oh, what a world, I'm melting." And she sinks and dies. But I thought, like, that just made me laugh so much, and I think I was laughing with the film, I didn't think, like, "Oh, this is so dumb." I thought, this is so dumb.
Yes.
Like, that she spits Jesus' blood in her face. How ballsy.
Yes.
I loved it.
Yes. I mean, the connection with the Wizard of Oz, that Wizard of Oz moment is very clear, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm melting.
But...
I thought it was quite silly, quite sort of campy, and once it started to embrace that more and more, I like that it didn't. I think what a film like this will often do is go down that kind of exorcist route of making it all about words and phrases. I mean, you see that the priest is doing a lot of that, trying to exercise various things and protect himself with the words of Christ, and that's obviously that's something that you see throughout these kinds of movies, but that it kind of goes kind of wacky instead. I really enjoyed. What can I say? I like that kind of thing.
Well, I was completely bored. I thought it was kind of... It's a film that is not up to the standards that the design, the lighting, and the cinematography afforded. It's kind of very bad, thin, cheesy storytelling.
I guess so, but I mean, I really expected nothing more. I was going into it like, when I thought it was directed by James Wan, which I did before the credits rolled, and I realised he just produced it, as he's produced all of the Conjuring universe. When I thought it was directed by James Wan, like, those were my expectations, because he's not a great director at all, and he operates in jump scares an awful lot, which the first half of this film really does. And so I guess my expectations were low enough to not be dissatisfied by that, but I can totally see how if you didn't go in with like low expectations or those specific expectations, you would be let down by it.
Well, I had no expectations because I didn't know what we were going to see. I mean, we just went to see this because the time was convenient. But actually, I think by any standard of a good film, this falls, well below.
Yeah, I guess so. There is one shot. No, it's true. I mean, I wouldn't see it twice, but I think there was some. And actually, for the first half, I was thinking, I really don't like this, because the kind of scares that the kind of scares that it deals in, these kind of slow build-ups to something that is going to be a jump at some point. Something's going to happen, and the film is very deliberately playing that. Taking a long time, and then it goes boom, and it's the loudness of the noise that always does it. Like, why do they have to be so loud when they do that? And I genuinely was like watching a lot of those moments through my fingers, because I thought, I just don't like that moment. And there's nothing enjoyable. That we've talked before about kind of whether a scary film is enjoyable or not. And like, I think a scary film, as I've said, sort of the thrill of being scared, there's nothing quite like that, and so I do enjoy it sometimes. But in these kinds of things, I really don't. And this isn't just a case of going, jump scares are cheap and easy, because I don't think that is the case. But they are. They do. It does always feel like they could have been a better scare somehow, and they're not as enjoyable as it's just not my taste, right? That's all it is. It's not my taste, because actually I think they're reasonably effective jump scares. The film is very, very clear as to like how it's building up its space. They don't come from out of nowhere, right? The film is taking its time to build up those moments, and some of them are quite creative. Like things come from where you don't expect, or have the shape of something you don't expect, or whatever. It's just not my taste. But that's But so for the first half, I really wasn't enjoying it. But like I say, when it started getting weirder and buying into its concept in a really weird sort of way, and slightly camping it up, I thought, no, I'm enjoying this now. Like I was with it. And there was one shot which I wanted to bring up, which I don't know if you picked up on as well. It's when Taissa Farmiga's character is in a sort of chapel. It's the chapel where the crucifix, Jesus has no head on it. It's been cut off, and she sees this shadow on a wall of a nun moving. It's in profile, and it's just a shadow. There's no nun there, and so she follows this thing round, and it walks round to the left. And then you approach a mirror, and there's a lot of stuff going on with mirrors in the film, and things jumping out and them cracking and this sort of thing. There's a lot of talk of them. And as the shadow gets to this mirror, it turns into a real nun. And basically, you see Taissa Farmiga looking at the mirror. So you see her reflection in the mirror, and then this nun appears to walk out behind her. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the shadow becomes the thing behind her. So you're like, and it's I think of the image becoming a different kind of image that's sort of more real, and then will it actually be behind her? Oh, it's creepy. That was great.
Well, I didn't think so, because I thought, so what does this mean? Like, because like you said, there was a lot of use of mirrors and a lot of reflections and so on. And then, so you think then that actually the reflection in the mirror must contain a clue as to, are these figures here? Are they in some imagination? Are they in another dimension? Like, yeah, and actually nothing is clearer at the end. So why are these things reflected in mirrors? And those moments. I mean, it was driving me crazy.
No, sure.
So I I really disliked it, and the only thing I'll take away from it is that it's a visually handsome film. Though when they say something it's merely pretty or whatever. It's because it's not mobilized to any kind of greater meaning or feeling or anything. It's just, nice to look at. And actually, and it's not the fault of, the production designer or the cinematographer or the lighting people that not much more is made, it's not better used, it's not better deployed. It is kind of offered up to the director to do something with, and the director does nothing.
What do we think of the film's understanding of Catholicism?
Well,
how is it using Catholicism and the ritual and rites?
I think the setting, the period, the country, and so on, offer all of these worlds that the film can draw upon, to actually kind of say something and convey something, and and the film doesn't have a clue, really. So I think just the same way that it doesn't realize that, Romania in 1952 was communist, and, that interesting things could be done in regard to that. That what's a Canadian doing in Romania in 1952, that could open up interesting story possibilities. Likewise, it doesn't have a clue about Catholicism. So
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, what I would say, like, I'm no big I'm no expert of Catholicism at all. What I'd say is it's a James Wan sort of understanding, which is so James Wan did the Saw films or created them and then went on to produce, and he did Insidious and he did Dead Silence, which I've seen, which is another. It's a creepy.
I think I might have seen Insidious.
It's a creepy puppet movie, and those are all surface. I mean, his obsession with creepy puppets and creepy dolls is all surface. It's not about sort of what's underneath or what could motivate. Like it's just about a creepy puppet and how creepy that is. Like there's nothing else to that. And in the same way, like the use of Catholicism in this is just like it's about how creepy nuns look when they're walking away from you.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Or like how creepy people are when they're in congregations.
Yes.
And there is some effective use of that. Like there is creepy imagery, but it's not it's not about like what Catholicism actually means or anything like that.
Yes.
Or whatever.
Anyway, I think we've said as much as can be said about a really bad movie, really.
Yeah. Oh my God! Did you know that James Wan is directing Aquaman, which you like the look of?
Well, there it goes. You see.
Although I can't blame him too much. We must emphasise that he was not the director of this. The director of this was Corin Hardy.
Yeah. So what has he done before?
He directed something called The Hallow in 2015, which is a British Irish co-production, which no one's heard of.
Well, there you go.
But it's made a lot of money.
It's a big
I mean,
hit.
not the Hallow. I mean this.
It's ostensibly a very big hit. It had a great opening weekend or whatever.
I think these films always seem to do well. The Conjuring universe. I do like the idea of a mad horror universe. I must say, there's just something quite nuts about that. You know? No, yeah. Just saying. I think even if the films are rubbish, which they.
This one is.
Well, this one is, and the others might be.
Yes. I don't remember. I remember quite liking the first one actually.
Yeah.
Yes. Though I think is Lily Taylor in it.
Lily Taylor, Carolyn Perrin, she plays.
Yes. So I liked her. She's got kind of an earnest, lived-in face. She looks like a real person, right? So it kind of grounded the film for me in something. And that's pretty much all I remember about it, really. Yeah.
The Nun cost $22 million and has made 131 so far.
Enormous success.
It's showing on every single screen at Cineworld. I mean, it's for a horror film. That's
very successful.
That's quite successful, really. I mean,
yes.
and to be dominating the screenings.
Just shows how.
It's a 15, so not everyone can see it.
How indiscriminating kind of audiences can be, or maybe it has a huge publicity budget. Because actually, the audience we were with didn't react to the film particularly. I mean, you didn't get the sense that people in the cinema loved the film.
No, someone laughed.
Well, okay, so got one laugh. I mean, you don't.
But I think they were laughing at it.
You didn't feel there was any love for the film, or the film was actually being very well received. So who knows? It could be making that money because of the expectations of the series, or or it has massive publicity or whatever, right? Like that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, well, I think it's down to the publicity because I think it has that feeling of like being this kind of movie. People will go to see this kind of movie.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Where it's like stuff coming out of the darkness and stuff jumping around and jump scares, and it has that sort of trailer.
Yeah.
So people just respond to that and will go see it.
Well, kind of. I'll have a look through Twitter afterwards because. Our policy is really not to. I mean, I didn't even know what we were going to see today, much less to read up on it. So, we do see these films as blindly. Sorry,
These films are wildly successful.
Sorry?
These films are wildly successful. Conjuring 1 grossed $319 million on a $20 million budget.
Mm-hmm.
The Conjuring 2 grossed $320 million on a $40 million budget. Let me just see about the Annabelle ones. Annabelle took $257 million on a $6.5 million budget, and Annabelle 2, or Annabelle Creation, took $306 million on a $15 million budget. These things are massively successful.
Yeah, well, so there's a market for
Jesus
kind
Christ.
of horror. We know that. But I wouldn't recommend people to see this. Actually, I thought it was really shit.
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact
dull.
despite the fact I ended up having a good time, I couldn't recommend it.
Yes. Okay, so on that note, let's end it here.
Yeah. Cheers and that.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We are on iTunes, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube, Facebook, and we have a WordPress page.
Yes, eavesdropping@themovies.com for the full list of. We've done 90 podcasts now.
Yes.
Edging towards the big 100.
Oh, yes. So, thank you very much for listening, and drop us a line if you have any questions or queries or disagreements. Goodbye.
Yes. Yes, goodbye.